6 years, over 2,000 days of a person's life completely erased. There is no memory, no single second of that time that can be recalled. You do not know where you were, what was done to you, or why you were the only one left. This is not just a story about a disappearance. It is a story about a return that raised far more questions than the vanishing itself. In 2017, 5 young and ambitious explorers walked into the impenetrable jungles of Cambodia and disappeared from the face of the earth. 6 years later, in 2023, one of them emerged onto a busy highway. He was an empty vessel, a man with no name and no past, his mind wiped clean by an unimaginable trauma. The story of what happened to him and the grim fate of the other 4 is a mystery that makes the blood run cold. And the most terrifying part of the story is the silence. The silence of the jungle and the silence of the sole survivor. To understand the ambition that drove these 5 people into the wilderness, you must first understand the place they were drawn to. Ratanakiri province in the remote northeastern corner of Cambodia. This is one of the wildest and least explored regions on the planet. It is a land of dense, primeval rainforests, sprawling rubber plantations, and volcanic crater lakes. There are few roads, and the vast majority of the province is an almost impenetrable jungle. A green hell of suffocating humidity, treacherous swamps, and a rich but dangerous biodiversity of snakes, insects, and predators. But this land also holds the secrets of a mighty, fallen empire. This was once the domain of the Great Khmer Empire, which, from the 9th to the 15th centuries, built the magnificent temple complexes of Angkor Wat. While Angkor is world famous, it was just the capital. The empire built hundreds of other temples, cities, and highways throughout the region, many of which were later abandoned and swallowed by the relentless jungle. The idea of finding a lost, uncatalogued Khmer temple is the ultimate dream for any explorer in Southeast Asia. And it was this dream that brought our 5 protagonists together. The group that assembled in early 2017 was a perfect blend of skill, experience, and ambition. They were not naive tourists. The leader was Liam, a 34-year-old former soldier from Australia, a man with extensive experience in jungle, survival, and logistics. He was the quiet, confident anchor of the team. With him was Chloe, a 29-year-old French medic and botanist. She was responsible for the group's health, and her medical kit was a masterpiece of preparation, containing everything from anti-venom to remedies for tropical fevers. Ben, a 28-year-old from the UK, was the tech expert. He was loaded with the latest gadgets: rugged GPS trackers, a powerful satellite phone, solar chargers, high-definition cameras, and a drone for aerial mapping. Maya, a 31-year-old historian from America, was the intellectual heart of the expedition. It was her research into ancient Khmer texts and local tribal legends that had pointed to the possible existence of a small, unnamed temple complex deep within Ratanakiri. And finally, there was Ethan, a 25-year-old documentary filmmaker, also from America. He was the storyteller, his job to capture their entire journey, from the hopeful beginning to the triumphant discovery. Their plan, formulated over a year of meticulous preparation, was as solid as it could be. They would drive a rented SUV to the last accessible village on the edge of the Great Jungle. From there, they would embark on a 60-kilometer trek on foot, deep into the wilderness, navigating with a combination of old French colonial maps and modern satellite imagery. They estimated the journey to the target location would take about a week, with another week to return. They were well equipped, carrying water filters, 3 weeks worth of high-energy food, signal flares, and the satellite phone with multiple fully charged battery packs. They established a strict communication protocol with their families. They would send a check-in message every 2 days. The first 3 days of the expedition went exactly according to plan. Their families received several short but cheerful messages via the satellite phone. "Everything's fine. We're on schedule. The jungle is something else," one read. They attached a couple of photos: 5 smiling, sweaty faces, looking tired but exhilarated, framed against a dense green wall of vines and ancient trees. The final message from the group was sent by Ben on the evening of the 3rd day. It read, "Signal is getting very weak. We're entering a low-lying valley area. Next communication session when we reach higher ground in 2 or 3 days. Don't worry, this is it." That was the last anyone ever heard from them. 3 days passed. Then 4. A week. An anxious silence settled over their families and friends. At first, they were told not to panic. The jungle was notorious for its poor satellite reception. Surely the group was just in a dead zone and would make contact as soon as they could. But when the second week passed with no word, it became terrifyingly clear that something had gone terribly wrong. A massive search and rescue operation was launched. The Cambodian government deployed military units who were joined by international volunteers and experts from the explorers' home countries. But Ratanakiri is a formidable opponent. From a helicopter, the searchers could see nothing but a continuous, unbroken canopy of treetops, a green carpet that stretched to the horizon, hiding whatever lay beneath. Combing the jungle on foot was a near impossible task. The heat and humidity were oppressive. Every step was a struggle, as search teams had to cut their way through the thick undergrowth with machetes. After 12 agonizing days of searching, one of the teams stumbled upon their last known campsite. The discovery was both a beacon of hope and a source of profound dread. The camp was located about 20 kilometers from the point where the last message had been sent. The scene was eerie. The tents were still standing, neatly arranged. A cold campfire pit sat in the center, but the people were gone. Personal belongings were still inside the tent's clothes, books, sleeping bags. It looked as if the group had simply gotten up and walked away, planning to return in a few minutes. But the most bizarre and terrifying discovery was not what was there, but what was missing. All of their most valuable and essential survival gear, their backpacks, their satellite phone, their GPS navigators, their first aid kit, and nearly all of their food supplies were gone. They had vanished, along with the 5 explorers. The investigators were completely baffled. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no torn fabric, no evidence of an attack by a large predator like a tiger. The team had clearly packed up their essential gear and left the camp willingly. But why? And where did they go? The first theory was that they had gotten lost, but Liam was a former soldier and an expert navigator. It seemed impossible that the entire group would get so disoriented that they would abandon their non-essential gear and wander off course. An attack by poachers or smugglers was considered, but there were no signs of violence, and taking 5 foreign captives would create a massive international incident, far too much trouble for criminals who thrive on secrecy. The search continued for another month, but it yielded nothing. The 5 explorers, it seemed, had been swallowed by the jungle. Eventually, the active search was called off, the case was officially declared an accident, and the 5 were presumed dead. The world slowly forgot the story. For 6 years, the green hell of Ratanakiri kept its dark secret. And then, the unthinkable happened. One of them came back. The DNA test results came back a few weeks later and sent a shockwave through the international community and the law enforcement agencies that had worked the case. It was a 100% match. The silent, broken, and feral man found wandering on the highway was indeed Ethan, the 25-year-old documentary filmmaker who had vanished into the jungles of Ratanakiri 6 years ago. The world now had a survivor, but his survival brought no answers. It only brought a new and even deeper level of horror. The investigation was resumed with renewed vigor, but the prime witness, the only person who knew it had happened to the other 4 explorers, was mute. His mind was a locked box. So, the investigators began a new, unprecedented kind of investigation. They started to study not his words, but his body, his instincts, and the ghosts of memory that seemed to haunt his subconscious. A full medical examination provided the first frightening clues. Ethan's body was a physical map of his suffering. Multiple old scars, long-healed but still visible, covered his back, arms, and legs. A forensic expert determined that the scars had been left by a blunt but hard object, possibly a heavy stick or whip made of knotted vines. There were also characteristic ring-shaped scars on his ankles and wrists, the unmistakable sign that he had been kept in shackles or tied with ropes for a very long time. His joints, especially his knees and ankles, were worn down to a state typical of a much older person, suggesting he had either walked for immense distances over rough terrain or, more ominously, had been forced to perform some kind of grueling, repetitive physical labor. Tests showed no traces of modern processed food, drugs, or environmental toxins in his body. His diet for many years had consisted entirely of foraged plants, roots, and likely raw meat. He had not used soap, shampoo, or any other modern chemical. He had been completely and utterly cut off from civilization. But the most frightening findings were psychological. He was diagnosed with severe, profound dissociative amnesia. He didn't just not remember what had happened. His brain, in order to protect itself from an unimaginable trauma, had completely erased his entire identity. He did not know his own name. He did not recognize himself in a mirror. He did not understand speech in any language, English or Khmer. When he was shown photographs of his smiling family or of his 4 friends from the missing expedition, he looked at them with a blank, empty expression, as if seeing them for the first time. He was a living ghost, a human shell, stripped of his personality, his memories, and his soul. His behavior in the hospital ward was like that of a wild animal brought into a cage. He was terrified of enclosed spaces, but he was even more frightened by the sight of the open sky through the window. He'd never slept through the night, but instead dozed fitfully for 15 or 20 minutes at a time, always sitting upright in a corner, his senses on high alert. He hid food from his meal trays under his mattress, and behind furniture, the ingrained instinct of a man who had lived with constant starvation. The psychologist who tried to work with him using traditional therapy made no progress. So they tried something else. They gave him paper and charcoal pencils. For weeks, he ignored them. Then one day, he picked up a piece of charcoal and began to draw on a sheet of paper. At first, it was just chaotic, meaningless lines. But day after day, a pattern began to emerge. He was drawing the same thing over and over again. It was a map, a primitive, almost childlike map drawn from the depths of his broken memory. It depicted a river that split in two, a mountain with a distinctive sloping peak, and a small cross drawn in the center of a valley. This map became the investigation's first solid lead. Analysts began to meticulously compare the crude drawing with high-resolution satellite images of the Ratanakiri province. And in one of the most remote and inaccessible areas of the jungle, a place the original search party had marked as impassable, they found a perfect match. The terrain, with its unique river fork and chipped mountain peak, was identical to Ethan's drawing. At the same time, linguists who were analyzing the strange, guttural, clicking sounds he made at night had a breakthrough. They concluded it was not a human language, but a sophisticated imitation of animal calls. They played him recordings of various animals native to the region. He reacted with extreme terror to the call of a rare great hornbill, a bird that is only found in the specific highland region identified on his map. The evidence was mounting. Ethnobotanists examining microscopic particles from his tattered clothes found spores of a rare fern that only grows on limestone cliffs in that same isolated valley. 3 independent lines of scientific evidence all pointed to one single, inescapable conclusion. Whatever had happened to Ethan and his friends had happened in that valley. It was decided to prepare a new expedition. This time it was not a rescue mission, but a heavily armed police and military operation. They flew by helicopter to the foot of the mountain range. As they entered the narrow gorge that was the only entrance to the valley, an oppressive silence fell. The guide who led them called it the place where the spirits are silent. Soon they found primitive but deadly traps made of sharpened bamboo. Then they found a small, abandoned settlement of crude huts. Inside, they found belongings from the lost expedition: a plastic lid, a piece of a backpack. The group had been here. Following the cross on Ethan's map, they came to the foot of a cliff. There, they found 4 small mounds of river stones, 4 graves. An excavation revealed the remains of the other 4 explorers: Liam, Chloe, Maya, and Ben, identified by the personal items buried with them. A forensic examination showed no signs of violence. They had all died from malnutrition and disease over a period of several years. But who had buried them? As the team examined the cliff face, they found a nearly invisible entrance to a cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. The Special Forces team entered, weapons ready. In the darkest corner of the cave, they found him, a wizened, elderly man dressed in animal skins, with long gray hair and a wild beard. He stared at them with animal curiosity and made a soft, guttural clicking sound, the same sound Ethan made. The final, horrifying truth fell into place. The old man was the sole inhabitant of the valley. He was likely a former Khmer Rouge soldier who had fled into the jungle in the 1970s after the fall of that brutal regime, and had lived in absolute isolation for 40 years, his mind lost to the wilderness. When the 5 explorers, likely lost and exhausted, stumbled into his valley, he did not see them as people. He saw them as a new possession, his own private tribe. He did not murder them, he kept them like animals. He tied them up to stop them from escaping. He fed them his own diet of roots and raw meat. He taught them his own language of clicks and bird calls. Their bodies, accustomed to civilization, could not handle the monstrous diet and the diseases. 4 of them slowly wasted away and died, and the old man, in his own twisted way, gave them burials. Ethan, the youngest and strongest, was the only one who survived. For 6 years, he lived in this hell, his mind and his humanity slowly being erased, until, by some miracle, he escaped or was let go, and began the long, aimless walk that would eventually lead him to a highway. The old man, declared insane, was taken to a psychiatric hospital. The remains of the 4 travelers were returned to their families, finally ending their years of uncertainty. And Ethan, he never spoke again. His memory never returned. He spent the rest of his days in a specialized care facility. He was calm, but his eyes remained forever empty, a living testament to an unimaginable horror. He was a man who had gone to the edge of the world to find a lost story, and had instead lost his own.